live in interesting times. Today's stories. A UN expert says evidence links Saudi Crown Prince to Khashoggi murder. The United Nations says more than 70 million people have been displaced at the end of 2018. Argentina's impoverished middle class pains to make ends meet. Hong Kong's pro-democracy lawmakers call on Carrie Lam to step down. President Trump denounces the fake news media and warns about radical Democrats during his launch campaign in Orlando. In Philadelphia, cranes unload a ship after U.S. authorities seized around 16 tons of cocaine. Tiny houses entice budget-conscious Americans. Plus, a U.S. agency in Hawaii performs an enduring mission in recovering the remains of fallen heroes. And Kalayaan 2019, Filipinos celebrate the 121st anniversary of Philippine independence in Washington with friends, food, and a concert. Hello everyone, I'm Anna Kui, bringing you stories from around the globe, and this is Eagle News, broadcasting from our Las Vegas studio. Calling for sanctions on the prince's personal foreign assets, a UN expert says there is credible evidence linking Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
I want to really insist that the responsibility of the state of Saudi Arabia is engaged into that execution, and there has been no demonstration that the state itself of Saudi Arabia has accepted its responsibility for the killings. What I do have is evidence suggesting that the responsibilities of high-level officials may be engaged and therefore is requiring further investigation, in particular of the Crown Prince, for a variety of reasons. The first one is that the people directly implicated in the murder reported to him. So there is a reporting line here that needs to be further investigated. Just given the evidence warranting international investigation, criminal investigation into the responsibility of the Crown Prince, it is a logical step for me to be asking for him to be included in the sanctions until and unless there is evidence provided that he was not involved, didn't know, should not have known of the execution. As far as the Secretary General is concerned, I am suggesting that he proceeds with appointing a panel of experts to undertake an international criminal inquiry into the killing, something I haven't done.
The United Nations says more than 70 million people were counted last year as displaced from their homes, a record that underestimates the real number of refugees and asylum seekers.
Last year, we reported 68.5 approximately million people, refugees, displaced people, meaning refugees in their own country, asylum seekers, and this year the figure has increased by almost close to 71 million people.
In its annual Global Trends report, the United Nations Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, described the figure of 70.8 million at the end of 2018 as conservative, particularly because the number of people who fled Venezuela's devastating crisis is undercounted. At the end of 2017, by comparison, 68.5 million people were counted as being forcibly displaced by violence or persecution. The UNHCR attributed the increase partly to surging displacement in Ethiopia caused by inter-ethnic conflict, and in Venezuela, where thousands are fleeing every day amid an economic collapse that has triggered shortages of basic food and medicine. According to the UN, An estimated 3.3 million people have left Venezuela since the start of 2016. UNHCR head Filippo Grandi told reporters in Geneva the figure of 70.8 million only includes Venezuelans who had officially applied for asylum, roughly 500,000 people. Overall, the number of displaced people in the world has doubled over the last 20 years and now exceeds the population of Thailand. The trend, Grandi said, continues to go in the wrong direction.
Peru is the second largest recipient of Venezuelans after Colombia. And they are really overwhelmed by the presence of all these people. And they have my full sympathy for that, because they have really been burdened in an extraordinary way. But we have been urging them to, just like Colombia and Ecuador, to keep, and Brazil, to keep the borders open, because these people really are in need of safety, of protection and so forth. L'appel que je fais maintenant, dans une situation où on a derrière nous les élections européennes, on a fini cette agitation électorale, au moins pour ce qui est du continent, on a des chiffres franchement gérables d'arriver en Europe. C'est le moment finalement d'affronter cette question. I usually don't like to praise and criticize, but I think in this case, I'd like to praise Germany for what it has done and say it is a model for other countries to follow. And then everybody tells me when I say this, yes, but the Chancellor paid a very heavy price politically. Well, the Chancellor was courageous. And the fact that she paid a heavy price means that she was even more courageous. And as I said many times, history will judge this.
The financial crisis in Argentina is leaving behind a worse-off middle class, forcing hungry families to soup kitchens and leaving young kids in squalid living conditions. Like many Argentines, Daniel, Roger, and his family found themselves slipping down the social ladder over the past year to join the one-third of their compatriots living below the poverty line.
Pero sí va siendo más difícil de mantener lo que sea el alquiler, la casa, los pañales, ropa, y era todo un gasto muy ya como que superaba. Entonces no había una necesidad de venir acá y buscar una ayuda, una contención.
Sideswiped by the country's swirling 57% inflation, their rent became too expensive and they were forced to move into a budget hotel to make ends meet. The downward spiral, familiar to many Argentines, a staggering 32% of whom are officially classed as poor, had begun. Roger's wife, 26-year-old Andrea Gomez, told AFP, quote, "Before we were renting an apartment, but we got to the point where we could no longer pay for it. Now we live in a hotel in a room that's too small for the four of us. We're paying too much, and now they are going to raise the rent."
O sea, a uno le cuesta caer en la realidad que está pasando ahora, que bueno, si no tenemos trabajo, no tenemos comida, o sea, y bueno, no, muy duro.
Gomez fears they will soon have to pack their bags again and find themselves on the street. Roger is an electrician, but since he lost his job a year ago, as President Mauricio Macri's austerity drive took hold, aimed at driving down inflation, he's had to take a series of odd jobs. The peso fell by around 50% against the dollar in a 6-month period last year, a collapse that pushed inflation even higher. The couple had to swallow their pride to broach another step on the downward spiral, availing themselves of one of the many free meal distribution points mushrooming across Buenos Aires, as ordinary people find themselves doing extraordinary things to survive. Gomez says, "You feel bad, it's shameful." She fills in for a cleaning company when it has work to give her. With their meager income, they just manage to pay their accommodation. On street corners across the Argentine capital, outside a church, or on a city square, NGOs and religious organizations offer hot meals, clothes, or blankets amid the first chill winds of the austral winter.
La plata tiene menos valor, los precios están todo por las nubes. Estábamos construyendo y tuvimos que dejar no se puede, o sea, no.
No importa que sea, que no soy una persona que quiere lujo, no queremos lujo nosotros ni nada. Solamente comer el fin de semana, que siempre se nombra el asado no es solamente comer el asado, es una reunión familiar.
Hong Kong pro-democracy lawmakers call on Chief Executive Carrie Lam to step down one day after she apologized for the political unrest that has shaken Hong Kong. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam apologized Tuesday for the political unrest that has shaken Hong Kong, but the pro-Beijing chief executive refused to bow to demands for her resignation. The semi-autonomous territory has been plunged into its biggest crisis in decades, with millions of people taking to the streets to demand the withdrawal of proposed legislation that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China. Lam suspended the bill on Saturday after two massive rallies that saw isolated bouts of violence between the police and some protesters. But that failed to quell public anger, and an even bigger rally Sunday drew over 2 million people, organizers said, more than a quarter of the population. Lam told a press conference she personally has to shoulder much of the responsibility. This has led to controversies, disputes, and anxieties in society. Lam said, quote, "For this I offer my most sincere apology to all people of Hong Kong." Activists have demanded the bill be withdrawn fully, for Lam to step down, and for police to be investigated for using tear gas and rubber bullets against protesters. They have also asked for all charges to be dropped against anyone detained during the protest. But Lam gave no indication she was prepared to step down, saying instead she wanted to continue to work very hard to meet the aspirations of the Hong Kong people. Lam tacitly suggested, however, that the extradition bill was unlikely to be revived given the public sentiment. She said, quote, "I will not proceed again with this legislative exercise if these fears and anxieties could not be adequately addressed. If the bill does not make the Legislative Council by July next year, it will expire, and the government will accept that reality." Up next, President Trump denounces the fake news media and warns about radical Democrats during his launch campaign in Orlando. In Philadelphia, cranes unload a ship after U.S. authorities seized around 16 tons of cocaine. Tiny houses entice budget-conscious Americans. Eagle News will return in a moment. Welcome back. You are watching Eagle News. President Donald Trump launched his 2020 re-election campaign Tuesday, much the same way he rode to power in 2016, with a raucous nationalist rally steering fear of illegal immigration and vowing to fight for blue-collar workers. Trump also denounced the fake news media and warns about the radical Democrats driven by hatred, prejudice, and rage in front of a crowd full of fans shouting, "USA, USA."
Ask them right there. By the way, that is a lot of fake news back there. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Lashing out at his Democratic opponents as radical leftists, fueled by hatred and out to rip your country apart, Trump promised an earthquake at the ballot box next year.
Our radical Democrat opponents are driven by hatred, prejudice, and rage. They want to destroy you, and they want to destroy our country as we know it. Not acceptable. It's not going to happen.
There were no substantial new ideas or plans for the future in Trump's nearly 80-minute speech in the Orlando arena, where the crowd formed a sea of Trump campaign red baseball caps, chanting USA and 4 more years. Instead, the unconventional Republican made his re-election pitch by touting economic gains, renewing his long-standing vow to build a wall along the Mexican border. Trump said, though giving no detail, that he would oversee cures for cancer and AIDS and pave the way to send U.S. astronauts to Mars. Cranes unload the freight ship MSC Guyane after U.S. authorities seized more than 16 tons of cocaine at the Packer Marine Terminal in Philadelphia. With a street value of over $1 billion, the bust is the largest in U.S. history. William McSwain, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Philadelphia, tweeted, "This is one of the largest drug seizures in United States history." Following the drug bust at Philadelphia's Packer Marine Terminal, McSwain's office said on Twitter, members of the ship's crew have been arrested and federally charged. According to local media, the drugs were found in 7 containers aboard the MSC Guyane cargo ship, which was leaving for Europe after having previously called in Chile, Panama, and the Bahamas. Images broadcast on local television showed vehicles from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection on the wharves of the port and 4 agents boarding the large container ship. The prosecutor's office did not immediately confirm the information. More and more Americans are downsizing their living quarters, embracing the minimalist approach. Owners of tiny homes believe their decision to go small leaves much smaller carbon footprints. The tiny homes revolution, which includes those on foundations and those on wheels, began a few decades ago, but the financial crisis of 2008 and the coming of age of millennials gave it a new impetus. The proliferation of home improvement shows on networks like HGTV fueled the trend, inspiring customers ready to personalize their own small living spaces. Cost is one of the driving factors. A tiny home of just over 200 square feet with a customized interior can go for about $50,000, a massive savings over a mansion in the suburbs.
It was a little challenging. It still is a little challenging. We're all right on top of each other. It's a lot easier now that it's spring and going into summer. It's a lot easier. But you know, we just make do. We all snuggle on the bed together. We watch movies. We can play games in there. To be honest, the space works really well. Yes, it's tight, but it's very functional. So us having lived in a travel trailer for 8 months compared to the tiny house is night and day. I mean, this is a house. I have a washer, I have a dryer, I have a full-size shower, the ceilings are tall, I've been upstairs and downstairs.
8 months ago, they moved into a tiny house in Reading, Pennsylvania, about 60 miles northwest of Philadelphia. Joan says that for a new house in the area, the family would have had to budget for about $300,000. The tiny home option is a huge difference. It makes living affordable. In most cases, the savings is not enough of a motivating factor. According to the Census Bureau, the average newly built family home in the United States measures about 2,600 square feet. Marcus Stoltzfus, the Director of Sales and Marketing for Liberation Tiny Homes in nearby Leola, says that over the last 40 years, Americans went into this McMansion phase where they built those massive homes.
A lot of people are coming in here, some out of want, but some out of necessity as well, with rising home costs, with student loan debt, with things like that. That's more of a necessity, but people are interested in it because they want to live simply and live a more minimalistic life.
Now, in some parts of the country, Stoltzfus says people are realizing that living with less is very advantageous to your lifestyle. Scott Bernier, who moved into a 370 square foot home about 4 months ago with his wife Melissa, says he's happy not to have as many possessions as before.
We started the process about 2 years ago. We really like the whole minimalist approach and kind of paring down and not having clutter everywhere and everything. So we started getting into tiny houses, and then to kind of get our feet wet, we tour around anytime we do like an Airbnb somewhere, it'd be a tiny house. Say, oh, we like this, we like that. There's a lot of like real old laws where they say, your house shall be bigger than 600 square feet, and nobody's changed it. And I know a lot of times there's there's a lot of pushback from neighbors. Like, we don't want a tiny house here. They just don't understand it. It's not big enough yet. So right now, especially, people are facing tons of hurdles.
A U.S. agency in Hawaii performs an enduring mission in recovering the remains of fallen heroes. And Kalayaan 2019. Filipinos celebrate the 121st anniversary of Philippine independence in Washington with friends, food, and a concert. That's next. Eagle News will be right back. Stay with us. This is Eagle News. I'm Anna Kui. Fulfilling our nation's promise. This is the motto for one U.S. government agency responsible for the accounting of all missing American service members who served in previous wars to be returned home to their loved ones. Our news team from Hawaii visited the agency's facility at Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hikam. Mio Sanas has the story.
And I often get asked in my travels, why do we do this? And isn't it like opening old wounds? On the contrary, this is about bringing closure to the families of the missing. And that is a huge part of our culture. And we find that, I just presided over a funeral a few weeks ago, and we brought home a sailor from World War II, and he had a 96-year-old sister. And I cannot tell you how happy and how thankful she was to have this closure, finally knowing where her brother was and to have him interred back here in the United States.
Located not far from Honolulu's International Airport is a Department of Defense agency with just about 600 military and civilian personnel. However, this small organization carries an enormous yet honorable task of fulfilling America's promise of bringing home the remains of all fallen service members from present and past conflicts. This is the Defense of POW MIA Accounting Agency, or DPAA.
So DPAA has existed for a little over 4 years, but the United States has been doing this mission for about 40 years. And it was taken on as a mission due to families of our missing, especially from the Vietnam War, that worked with our government and our Congress to press us to take on this as a mission to try and account for all of the Americans missing at that time back from the Vietnam War. Back in 2010, the U.S. Congress passed a law that asked the Department of Defense to account for all Americans missing from past conflicts as far back as World War II.
According to DPAA's annual report, 2018 was a record breaker for the agency as it successfully accounted for 203 personnel from past wars, the highest number achieved in 1 year. DPAA attributes this success to the expansion of using technology and science, as well as recent improvements in conducting field operations.
Because we do missions all over the world. We work in Europe, North Africa, Central, South America, all over Asia, and all over the Pacific Islands. And so because we have such a diverse mission set, we have a really strong planning component to the mission with a lot of experts who are very good at planning missions. We also have a pretty impressive logistical capability that includes military airlift, the ability to send teams and equipment to very, very remote corners of the world. And so when we're going to plan a mission, we have some formal processes that happen in the agency to include budgeting, coming up with specific plans, deciding what kind of experts need to be on the ground. Is it mountaineers, or is it going to be divers, or is it going to be a normal team that doesn't have mountaineers or divers? We have to have explosive ordnance personnel to deal with unexploded bombs.
As soon as the remains and other related items are collected and shipped back to Hawaii, John and his team perform thorough examinations, which can be much more painstaking and detailed than what we normally see on TV or in the movies.
We're responsible for the scientific aspects of our mission, and that includes scientific field recovery, so recovering evidence in the field. It also includes the identification of human remains that are brought into the laboratory, as well as the analysis of material evidence. So that would be like artifacts, airplane wreckage, things of that nature. Well, we consider our lab to specialize in what a lot of people would call residual remains. That is the remnants of what's left after many decades since a person died. So this would be hard tissues such as bones and teeth. It would be the artifacts that are durable that they had on their person. So things like clothing tend not to survive, but buttons survive, belt buckles, boot soles, whereas the upper parts of the boots tend to not survive. So it's these more durable components that are left after many, many years, and our laboratory specializes in getting the most information we can from those more durable components.
DPAA also takes pride in building strong partnerships with other countries. The Admiral even cites one particular country in Southeast Asia as an example for its unwavering support to America's cause.
One of the countries that we do regular operations on is the Philippines. Matter of fact, there are over 8,600 Americans unaccounted for in the Philippines. Matter of fact, that's the most of any country in the world. We do field operations throughout the Philippines. 4 missions this year alone, either have already been done or are scheduled to be done. And so our relations with the Defense Ministry in the Philippines is very close and very supportive. That is a very important part of our work throughout the Indo-Pacific region especially. But great relationships and great support. We also not only work with the Philippine government, we also do work with with the University of Manila, and partnering with a U.S. university and the University of Manila, doing work with us both throughout most of Luzon and other regions of the Philippines. So that's a very important part of our effort in this part of the world.
In addition, DPAA acknowledges the importance of maintaining constant communications with loved ones who have to wait for months or even years on the whereabouts of their missing heroes.
Well, we have a daunting mission. There's a reason why all of these soldiers are still missing, is because they were difficult to locate or difficult to identify back at the end of the war. But we are putting the best science available against the problem. We're putting a pretty massive logistical capability against the problem. We're getting into very remote regions, high up on mountaintops, on glaciers. We're going under the ocean, and we're doing underwater recoveries, and we're doing a lot to try to resolve as many of these cases as we can, and we do it with a strong sense of urgency. We know that for the families that are waiting, it can't possibly be fast enough, but we do have a strong sense of urgency in what we do.
One of our core missions is to communicate with the families of the missing, veteran service organizations, family support organizations, other government entities. So we do put a lot of effort into providing regular family member updates, where we go visit different cities around the United States each year. And the services have casualty offices that assist us and are part of this effort, and they reach out to next of kin of missing in action in the area where we're going to go do briefings. And family members are able to come and get updates on their fallen and on our program overall. So we can provide them the latest and where we're at in terms of research, how we do a scientific analysis. They can learn about their loved one's case itself specifically. So that is a big part of our outreach to families. We also have a very large web presence. Also, opportunities such as this to share our mission and our efforts with audiences is very important to us. We can never get enough information out to the family, so it is a very big part of our mission.
Previous conflicts where these missing individuals served include World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Cold War, Operation Desert Storm, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Additional information about the DPAA is available through the website www.dpaa.mil.
At present, there are still tens of thousands still missing, and through this agency, the U.S. government will not stop until all the fallen heroes are found and returned home to their loved ones. Reporting from Joint Base Pearl Harbor, Hickam in Hawaii, I'm Mio Asenas, 1 with 25.
Thanks, Mio. Meanwhile, for Kalayaan 2019, Filipinos celebrate the 121st anniversary of Philippine independence in Washington with friends, food, and a concert at the Kennedy Center in D.C. Formally addressing guests of the celebration, Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Romualdez, said in a speech, "An independent country must be self-reliant, able to use its own resources to provide the basic needs of its people and liberate them from the bondage of poverty." Guest of honor Undersecretary of State for Management Brian Bulatao said the U.S. and the Philippines share a long history and are connected by the bonds of friendship and democracy. Bulatao added the U.S. government wishes for the friendship of the two nations to endure for the years and decades to come, and that may the Philippines and the U.S. continue to work together with courage of a nation, compassion for the people, and deliver on their share of aspirations of prosperity, security, and liberty. Miss Universe Catriona Gray joined Romualdez and Bulatao for the ceremonial cake cutting and posed for photographs with eager guests. A concert by Philippine treasure Cecile Licod, sponsored by the U.S.-Philippine Society, followed the reception. Licod awed guests with a powerful performance of pieces by Filipino composer Francisco Buencamino and Polish composer Frédéric Chopin. That is today's Eagle News. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you stories that matter to you. Visit our website at eaglenews.ph. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Anna Kui, and I am 1 with 25.